these sort of go-to drills that we use probably on a daily basis.
Definitely.
Right? Lead arm only, obviously, pretty self-explanatory. I think, especially for newer players, getting them to understand how that lead arm works, how it rotates, how we see this a lot, right? We always say rotation creates extension. Everybody wants to look like that, okay? But if they're not rotating, that's why you see. You look in the hack motion, what we were talking about before. The amount of rotation with the higher handicappers, you see a lot of rotation past impact, right? From 7 to 8, because they're trying to save it. It's too late, right? So let's go into the open-handed drill.
Yeah, so
because that's we're kind of running out of time here.
So we're going 2 open hands or only the trail hand open?
Trail hand.
Okay, yeah. So again, for your golfers who
you're good, guys. It's all right.
You're good. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're all right.
Great. So
And don't worry too much about time.
Perfect. Yeah, that's why I like being last, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I know Jason would probably agree that this is especially pertinent when it comes to pitching. When you see golfers who have the idea that they need to grab onto the grip with their hands and move the club head in towards the ball without pivoting the handle. So what you're going to see is an early flexion of the trail wrist prior to when they get to impact. So if you can think about the force you're putting into the grip, literally you're tossing the club into your follow through using your trail hand. Well, what keeps the hand on the club is the fact that your fingers are on the other side of the grip to catch the handle. So if I'm throwing with the back of the hand, it doesn't actually come off because the fingers are there to hold it on the other side. But if you simply take the hand open and remove the fingers from the other side and apply that same force throwing it, what you'll find is that the hand will come off the grip. So if you can trade throwing the club actively with the right hand for some pivot, you should be able to keep the trail wrist more extended as you're approaching impact. And if you can keep it on, then you are guaranteeing that you're keeping the speed up more with your pivot instead of allowing the momentum of the club to throw past your body.
Yeah, so I call this a drill, just layering your drills, right? So you have sort of a progression that you're going through with your players, and that's usually the first one. Like you said, if they move through it and they don't pivot their body, everything separates, and then it's immediate feedback. So then we go into the claw drill, which gives them a little more support, but we're still trying to get them to train that offside.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, when I'm grabbing onto this club head and I'm throwing in towards the ball, you can imagine how fast I would want to close a club face.
Yeah.
But if I take the size of the couple here and I reduce it in half, now I can't apply that force nearly as much. So you're probably cutting off about 2/3 of your club face closing, right? So what are we trading that with? At that point, now they have to learn how to add flexion in the lead wrist in order to get the face to look in the same place, even though the handle's more forward.
Mm-hmm. You like this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah,
if they can do that with just your normal orange whip, then I think the orange whip wedge is really, really helpful, just because if you're going into the golf ball and you're throwing it, you can see how much this club is going to want to torque and bend. So if you can ask your golfers to hit some shots without the shaft bending, again, that's guaranteeing that you're not applying that in-plane torque actively with your trail hand. So the shaft's going to hopefully arrive more forward, right? And you can notice how if you don't apply that closing, then you're going to have a club face problem.
Motorcycle screwdriver.
That's right. So if you can hit shots with this without it bending and hit it towards your target, then you know that you're closing it properly instead of closing it in plane late.
Okay. No thumbs.
No thumbs. Okay.
This is awesome. This is a great drill.
I can't take credit for this one. I can't take credit for the open hand.
Is this Rob Holding?
This is Rob Holding.
Yeah.
Yes. I think John Sinclair was the first one to do the open hand, but this is a great one, especially for, we're talking about underloading at the top of the backswing.
Too much radial.
That's right.
Yep.
But what I think what this does is it adds context to how you're accelerating the club in the backswing. So a lot of times what Monty was talking about is that those late accelerators of the club, right? They think they need to take it back low and slow, and then they decide, I have no energy here. I need to hit a certain amount of distance. Let me go ahead and have a snap transition. And then what you're going to find is that because of where the hand is sitting here, as I have that snap transition, the momentum of the club would be going into my thumbs. So if you remove the thumbs and have that same snap transition, what you'll see is that the club will come out of your hands. So if you can have a decent grip with the clubs a little bit more down in your fingers, with the thumbs off. Now you have to create a little bit more momentum to the club early so that once you're approaching the top of the backswing, you can kind of let it settle, let it collect a little bit more smoothly.
You're using the pressure points
That's right.
in the middle two fingers rather than the thumbs.
Absolutely.
I think it's really good.
Yep.
You said you can hit it, what, like 85, 90%?
If
of
you
your
can,
full swing?
if you can keep
You
the
do it
club in your kind of in the base of your fingers and not let it go back to your thumbs, the whole swing, you can hit it usually about 80 to 85% of your normal distance.
Cool. All right, last one for forearm, ball between the arm,
Yeah.
between the elbows.
That's yours.
Pretty good, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so go ahead and do that one. Show them how to
Yeah.
do
So
that.
talking about this would relate to the dual supination idea, but
I
it's
love
also a great way to again, if you're throwing the club forward and those arms are going to separate, then it's going to be really easy to drop this ball. But if you can swing it back and just kind of keep it in your arms, don't squeeze it too much. And then as you start to go into your downswing, really start to apply some pressure, certainly with the trail arm going in more closer to the lead, then you should be able to hit some shots. Really pretending if there's water in here, you're really squeezing the water out of this spot as well into the follow through.
It's also good for, I've had a couple, you've probably seen some of my juniors that get crossed up too much, right? And this right shoulder is going internal. Then I use this a lot to kind of get them to feel that, to where they're actually changing their wrist angles a little bit, but also changing the way the right arm looks at the top to get it a little bit more online or less crossed up, depending on which direction you're going with that shaft position at the top. So good stuff, man.
Yeah.
All right. So do we have time for questions, or tell me?
Yes, there's a bit of time for questions, and Eddie is asking for you to demonstrate the motorcycle drill.
Motorcycle drill?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, it's more of a metaphor. So go ahead and take it up to the top of your swing there. It's more of just the way to describe to somebody how that lead wrist needs to move into flexion. I use a basically screwdriver or reverse motorcycle, which is basically revving a motorcycle. So you can see how so one of the things I'll do a lot of times, not too much now, obviously with COVID, I don't try to get too close to my players, but at the top of the swing, I'll twist the face open and I'll tell them to close it. So they're having to resist. So he's having to actually make the motion, right? So I'm a big fan in making the player do the work. See that right there? So that's a great way to get them to actually feel what it is to close it early and downswing. Good question.
Great. Maybe a very general question about what is the most interesting thing you found about trail wrist so far, experimenting with the bait app?
I mean, really, it's the pronation supination thing. I think has been the most interesting. But it just shows you how the hands are really trying to fight each other, right? I mean, that right hand's wanting to push that lead wrist into extension, and the left wrist is wanting to resist. You know, it's just. That's where the poor players, I think they get too much of this, obviously, early, right? So you got to train. That's why I'm a big fan of getting people to really train their lead side or lead arm so that they can actually control what that right wrist, like Robbie was talking about. You know, this move here is critical. Throwing the club behind you, big fan of that underload pump drill. I did that last year, which is what Monty's talking about, throwing at 8 o'clock. I think that's fantastic. But again, it just shows you how we got opposing forces going on there big time. And it also shows you the importance of how people grip it, and also the spacing between their hands can make a big, big difference as well.
What's your preference on that?
Which one?
As far as the spacing between the hands, what have you found?
I like them closer. You know,
Yeah.
I like them closer.
Small
I'm telling you, it's just little changes in the grip. You got to pay real attention to your players, and especially you get people that try baseball grips and the thing starts separating. You're gonna see that graph kind of go all over the place. No control. We found, I think we were looking at the difference between the good players in that pronation supination rate of rotation number that hack motion gives you, and like I mentioned it earlier, the higher handicappers, you're going to see a bigger number from 7 to 8. Because they're trying to square that thing so late, right? So it shows the importance of, if you can learn to teach your players how to get it up to the top and how to start that nice soft transition, how the wrists work, you're going to help a lot of golfers.
All right, that sounds great. There's a question about, can you show the elbow supination drill again?
Sure. Yes. Yep. So again, understanding what we're trying to see here is that we've got the trail forearm going this way, at the same time that the lead forearm
Turn
is
that way. I
supinating
think
this
it's probably, yeah, there you go. In plane. There you go.
Trail forearm is going to keep supinating as the lead forearm supinates.
So show them what the poor players do. Like when you see this right elbow kind of come out, there you go. You see that look right there, right? What's happening? We're putting a lot of force on the back of the shaft. I mean, we see that a lot,
the
right?
elbows are apart.
Yeah. So if you can train that move, again, that's the shallowing move is really, it's not just, it's not just, I mean, I'm not a big fan of right bending to try to get that thing to shallow. It's really if you can get them to do this with their wrists, under load, now you can keep them at a right bend, keep them from hurting their back, and you can add rotation. You don't get as much of this. I think that's really super important for everybody to understand out there.
All right, one more question. What's a good drill to improve shaft lean at impact?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly with good drill to improve shaft lean. Okay, here's one that we didn't list. So I'm a big fan of like a ground up type of movement where you're not manually grabbing onto it with the hands and trying to make the club move a certain direction. So I call this the waggle drill. So you're basically, you can start with no thumbs, very holding-esque. Just get the arms to kind of rest on your chest, feeling like they're long, loose, and heavy. You're not grabbing onto that handle per se, and then just start to make some pressure shifts back and forth. And so what you can start to see is that if I pause this motion right here, because of the momentum of the club and the fact that I have allowed my body to get out in front of it, that you're going to arrive with shaft lean if your sequence is ground up. Typically,
Sheftik board's really good.
Sheftik
Shout
board is
out to Mark Sheftik. We use that board a lot to get them sequencing the pressure at the right time.
That's right.
So it's more of a, when is that shift and when is the club going back, right? Which could start to create some, a little bit of float, obviously, for a good player, and then have some rotation.
But the key here is that when I'm doing this initially, it's almost chest height, right? So you're not wanting the float load to go this way, right? So the float load isn't going into the lead wrist going this way. If anything, I mean, you could even do it right with the right arm only and just feel, I call it a wave, a bunch of different ways you can think about it. You just feel the momentum of the club going back as you transition and don't try to fight it. Then a lot of times you're going to end up in that.
And you're loading that left wrist early that way too, right?
Yeah.
So not a bad way to teach your average golfers.
Yeah.
Good question.
All right. And then one more. Can you do the first drill again, please, with Orange Whip Club?
The open hand?
I think so, yes.
Is that it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So with just this one?
Yeah, open hand drill.
Yeah. So you're going to get, and it's super
Can everybody see him?
Super important with your golfers is that when you're getting them into doing it, they have to find their normal grip.
Yeah.
And then they're opening the right hand wide open, almost as if you had like a wall on the other side of the grip. And so my fingers are fully extended. If you look from here, right, I'm not closing them this way in at all. And so if you can keep your hand open, fully extended, and just make some soft little pitching motions like this without the hand coming off the club, then you're squaring it properly more with body rotation and having a little bit of shaft twisting as opposed to trying to take your right hand and toss the head down towards the ball.
And it's interesting because you'll see they want to, and I'll ask them the questions like, when do you feel like you want to grab the club?
That's great.
When do you feel like you want to put your right hand on it? And that's going to tell you a lot about how they're sequencing and how much pressure and force they're putting into the back of the shaft at the wrong time.
When have you seen them normally say it?
Usually very early, like transition. Yeah, very early transition. Yeah.
That's why I love this again, because if they grab it, then they're not going to see the wave in the trail arm. But if they're not grabbing the club, they should be able to create a nice little wave from the shoulder and the elbow and the trail wrist as a response to what you're doing with the ground.
What they're doing with your feet.
Yeah.
Dr. Kwan. Quantification.
That's right.
All right. I think one last question to go over one more drill, the very, very first that Robbie did. I'm not sure which is the name, but you probably remember.
The holding no thumbs.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
think so.
The thumbs. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's just make sure they get the grip right first.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing this, the
Stays
thumb
thumbs-
pads are off. If you cheat it, you get the thumb pads on it, but you just take the thumbs up. It's actually the hands themselves are both going to be open as you're doing this. And the goal is again to see, you might have to start with just a pitching motion, start slower, start shorter, but if you can make a backswing in a transition without that club coming off of your thumbs, then you're speeding things up and slowing things down in a way that wouldn't pull that lead wrist into radial deviation. And so a lot of times with this drill, it'll come out of your thumbs.
Yeah.
If you had your thumbs on, you'd see a lot of bend in the shaft at the top. So keeping that club from bending as you're changing directions is another good way to think about that as well.